Hello folks, hopefully you can hear me okay. Yes, welcome to FlippingThePyramid.co.uk. If you're not actually on the site or visited the site, go check it out please. Yes, and this is Virtual Shamanizing with me, the HairyCookieMunster. Loud and clear in the chat room, thank you. Okay, cool. Now we can carry on then. Yes, hello, welcome. It is the 16th of the 8th, 2012. Lots of divisions of 4 in there. Yes, maybe interesting, maybe not. I may get somewhat esoteric on your ass later on. But don't get too worried. We will only be dipping our toe in, maybe. Well, you dip in as much as you wish to. But yes, be prepared to have your coincidence hat on later on. But I'll get back to that later. Yes, another interesting week, another tightening twist of the spiral, maybe, as we accelerate towards that novelty, that singularity. And yes, of course, that is all speculative, possibly. Again, something I will reference later on, maybe. Certainly relevant to some of the stuff I want to talk about. Where shall I begin? Shall I begin with the usual, doing a few of the news stories? As I said, yet again, there's been lots and lots going on recently, so there are lots and lots of news stories for you to be looking at, lots of interesting things happening at the moment. Yes, is it a decade within a week? Saw somebody posted a quote from, I think it was from Stalin, I saw on some article somewhere, which I thought was quite appropriate. Sometimes it feels like you have a whole decade within 1 week, or something along those lines. I can't remember it properly, so yes, caffeine to accelerate my neurons. Hello to Adonis in the chat room. Glad you made it, mate. If you haven't checked out his show, regular radio show on Finn, freedominfonetwork.org, go and check him out with his Wake the F Up show. Wake the up. Some good tunes and some interesting observations, anecdotes, debating, etc. Yes, Adonis, it's well worth it to listen to. If you haven't heard him before, folks, please go and check him out. Yes, sorry, before I got distracted by the chat room. Back to what I was going to mention. Bob Diamond. It's a great name for somebody like him, isn't it, really? You know, is that really his name, or did he change his name? Or it makes me curious. But strangely enough, when I was looking at my emails earlier today, looking at my newsletter updates and things like that, according to the Yahoo News, I don't have a link to this, which I'll explain. On their sort of general roundup page, where they list a roundup of news headlines, there is a clickable link headline saying Diamond to get £2 million Barclays payoff. But when you try and go to it, the story's no longer there. Oops, sorry, the page you requested doesn't exist. So, made me curious. I had a bit of a mooch round on their own site and other sites, but that story seems to have disappeared. So it makes me curious of, did Yahoo jump the gun a little bit with that headline and they were told to take it down? Keep your eyes and ears open, folks. Yes, there may be some interesting news about Mr. Diamond again. He has been somewhat in the news of late, as he should be. He should be behind bars, but there you go. Along those lines, sort of, if you've been watching the news in general, you might have happened to see that the LIBOR scandal is still bubbling away in the background. It's not so much hitting that much of the headlines, but it most definitely still chugging away. This was one I picked up from the Telegraph. It was while I was trying to find more info on that Bob Diamond story. This was about the only other thing going up in recent news. This is 15th of August on telegraph.co.uk. US steps up LIBOR inquiry as 7 banks issued subpoenas. So, yes, several banks, which includes JP Morgan Chase, Barclays, Royal Bank of Scotland, HSBC, and I think there are a few others, are being investigated. As it says in the article, Barclays have already been fined $290 million for their role in the LIBOR rigging, but $290 million, really, yeah, that's like a fart in the wind to them and their profit margins. It's not really going to make any difference to them, is it? It's quite good that they managed to get away with this with just a little slap on the wrist so far. But yes, keep an eye on that chugging away in the background, and Mr. Diamond's happy dance into the sunset with his pocket full of change that he has stolen from you. If you are a taxpayer, that's basically what has gone on here, folks. And of course, it's not just him. It's quite a few of them have to be involved. They all deserve to get prosecuted and put behind bars. But come on, folks. How long you've been looking at this stuff? How likely do you think that is going to be? And of course, sort of going alongside with this, I haven't got any particular links for this because it seems to be fairly prevalent across the internet in that usual kind of fashion. Is that article doing the rounds with the one, I can't remember her name now, she used to run a merchant bank or something like that, so putting out a warning to everybody to not keep your money in the big banks because they are likely going to crash. And there's been, of course, other similar articles, news reports, etc., that have been put out over the last few days about said collapse of these bigger banks. So whatever you're doing, folks, don't get trapped into the fiat paper jungle of money magic that these gambling money junkies like to play with. They are just deliberately manipulating everything to suck the money out of your pockets, put it in their own pockets, or to put it into some offshore phantom existence with the rest of their however many trillions that is supposedly built up to now. A giant vacuum, a giant funnel to suck the productive value from the base of the pyramid up to the top as fast as they can. They know the shit is going to hit the fan soon, so they're grabbing as much as they can, as they, like typical rats leaving a sinking ship. Run for the hills, grab as much as you can as you're running. Another story which sort of chatted with folks about a little bit earlier, most definitely in the news at the moment. You cannot avoid this news story at the moment. Mainstream media are most definitely putting it out there in front of everybody, and that, I think, is part of the situation that you should take note of. Anyway, yes, Julian Assange, shall I call him, if a nice Julian Assange, as I've mentioned, I think possibly before, shows here, if not shows elsewhere, I really don't trust Mr. Assange. I really don't like the cult of personality kind of crap that flies around him. I don't entirely trust WikiLeaks. The reasons for that, yes, which you can look into for yourself. And I don't really follow the whole anonymous, unquestioning support of Mr. Assange. But that aside, looking at the actual situation itself, and as I say, the fact that it is literally viral in the mainstream media, it's not viral in the sort of traditional sense of it being passed around by general users of the internet, i.e., becoming almost like alternative media. That's what truly viral means. But no, this is just propagating like crazy across the mainstream media. Look at this story, people. Look at it. Look at this story, Mr. Assange. Oh, so yes, they want you to see this story in this situation. As I said, cult of personality. Beware the puppet they dangle in front of you. They make him dance. But anyway, yes, this sort of there's a few news articles obviously about this at the moment. Telegraph had got one. I'll pick this one, just this one, which come up on RT, which was quoting William Hague talking about the situation. This is on RT.com, their news site. Let me just open it up again. So I'm multitasking and trying not to keep too many windows open, so I'm not saturated my system too much anyway. Actual title of the article is Hague, we are determined to see alleged criminal Assange extradited to Sweden. Now the reason I plucked this out is for the main reason that I wanted to point out at this situation. But all the stuff about Assange himself to one side and the stuff about WikiLeaks to one side is please take note that WikiLeaks is currently under hacking attack. I think it's a DDoS attack where their site has been offline for several days now. I think certainly the last week, I think it is. All that to one side. The actual details of his case, which again in the general talking media about this situation, they're not really going into the details of his case. They just keep repeating the fact that it's rape allegations, rape. So that word being pushed into your head constantly. Assange, rape, Assange, rape, Assange, rape. They want emotive reactions, and they want you to idolatrize. I can't say that word. The shiny-haired angel being that is Assange. But anyway, yes, what I wanted to point out is what seemed most apparent to me was the UK government basically turning around and saying to the rest of the world that if our masters can point the fingers towards the Anglo-American alliance and the influence of America in this situation, if our masters tell us they want this person, we will do everything to get them. None of your diplomatic stuff matters anymore. It doesn't matter if you've got this embassy and diplomatic laws surrounding it. No, we'll just come in and take him. That to me is the most significant thing of what's going on here. It seems pretty obvious if you followed this story, not just particularly this event, but the story of Assange and his case in Sweden, etc. It seems pretty obvious that if he does get extradited to Sweden, it will basically be a revolving door to send him to the United States of America. He'll be lucky to spend a day or two actually in Sweden, because supposedly they just want to question him. He's not even officially charged with anything. They just want to talk to him, even though they have refused to do that by any other method. It was offered that they would set up an electronic conference, a video conference, where they could ask him whatever it is they want to ask him, and they refused. They said no, he has to actually come here. So it's most likely that he will step off one plane and near enough be ushered straight onto another plane to the USA. What happens to him from there, then it becomes highly debatable. Again, I still point at, though, the way this is being used as a herd leader. Like sometimes one particular horse would be put at the front of the herd to encourage the herd to go one particular direction. using him as a lure to people's attention. Look at what's going on here. As I said, it's very emotive as well. Assange rape, Assange rape, Assange rape, constantly reinforced. And for the majority of people looking at these kind of news stories that are presented on the mainstream media, they don't ever really look into the details. They just see those emotive cues being given to them and they automatically respond. So anyway, yes, I had intended to not spend too much time on this particular story because I do think a lot of it is deliberate distraction and it's deliberate steering of certain demographics within the herd. Yes, I'm glad that people went to stand outside the embassy and protest the situation because our own government is being completely hypocritical in what they're doing. It brings into question diplomatic relations with every other nation on the planet, etc. It's a very silly situation where their hypocrisy needs to be pointed out to the rest of the public. So yes, I'm glad that people did go there and protest, but I would put a flag of warning up about that. Like I say, the whole idolatry that goes along with Assange as a cult figure. Moving on from that, like I said, just general news, and as I've been trying to do, I've sort of dipping into some of the news. Some of it tenuously links together, as I like to do, but it's generally just things that I've sort of caught my attention that I felt like sharing with people. It's not necessarily very esoteric or occult or anything like that. It's just, general things that are going on help to keep prodding those neurons of people to get you to question, to get you to think a bit more about these things that are constantly put in front of you, so you're not necessarily succumbing to the propaganda. Anyway, another one. This one from the good old Daily Mail, and I think you might very well have seen this. It's been again all over the place recently. And certainly propagated virally across the alternative media. The Daily Mail's good for that. The Daily Mail is a fertile ground for those kind of articles that get the alternative media frothing at the mouth, including myself. But anyway, silliness aside, this is a subject that I often talk about. I know, I'm sorry, it's repetitious, constantly banging the same old drum. And it's something that I think I did talk about in recent episodes. This just adding a bit more to it. This somewhat, I think, as well links into the trapwire issue that is emerging at the moment. Yes, it is. The article is referencing the trapwire. As an extra side note to that, I would recommend, if you don't already watch it, it might be worth checking out, is a link to their latest episode. That's the New World Next Week. Little webisodes on YouTube which are put out by the Corbett Report with MediaMonarchy.com. And they do little roundups of the news, some of the news articles, and they go a bit more in detail about the trapwire situation, and there are links from their latest upload, which if you want to, you find further links into investigating that. But I deliberately just plucked this one from the Daily Mail because, as I say, this particular article, I've seen it propagate across various alternative sites fairly quickly since it come out. What was it, 13th of August, a few days ago. Again, I would say, like I think I've said fairly often recently, please don't be naive to the fact that governments state powers, whatever you want to call them, whether they be overt, as in the actual people you think you vote into power and you see on TV every day, or whether it be the people who are actually in the background pulling the strings and shuffling the thrones. Yeah, of course they'll do this kind of stuff. You really think they wouldn't? Again, this has been part and parcel of what I've been trying to get across to people for a long time. Please don't be naive. If you give these institutions the kind of powers that you have given to them, you really think they wouldn't do stuff like this? In an objective sense, from their point of view, it would be silly not to do things like this. You know, even if they are in a goodly, law-abiding fashion, just trying to fulfill what they delusionally, my words are just failing me tonight, in a delusionary fashion, thinking their role is, they will enact things like this because they believe they're helping. Now, I'm talking about the vast majority of people that would be involved in these kind of operations. You know, I think once you start climbing up that pyramid and looking at the people in power that implement this kind of stuff and actually dream it up in their think tanks, supposedly, you know, then it gets a bit different. But for the majority of people that are out there doing these kind of jobs, you know, like your average Bobby on the beat, etc., they think they're helping. They believe they're helping. They have to. Once that belief starts to crack, you know, from my point of view, that's hopefully some of what needs to happen. But once that belief starts to crack, they're not really doing the job that their masters want them to do. And that's part and parcel of why they need unquestioning obedience. Unquestioning obedience. You don't need to think about what I'm telling you to do, you just do it. But anyway, yes, this is one of the current situations that's emerging that I think is worth watching simply for the cui bono, the paper trail of possibly being able to eventually link this to actual people. You know, to put names to faces, to put names to orders, to put names to those that initiate and use this kind of stuff to break the law, as far as I'm concerned. And how, as well, of course, like I said, you know, I talk about this a lot, how it is an obvious, even to those people that like to deny it as being overly paranoid or sci-fi, tinfoil hat or whatever else, it's another apparent overt example of this occurring around you. The electronic prison, the virtual prison that is being built around you. You know, I think I mentioned it last week, the story about the Facebook recognition cameras, or maybe it was Blue Bus mentioned it Monday. I was listening to Blue Bus's show on Monday night. Thank you, Blue Bus. I think it was you that mentioned it. Yeah, the Facebook facial recognition cameras that are being tested. Yeah. Let's put it, it's that incremental rollout, isn't it? It's not so much that they're testing it, it's more that they're normalising what they are planning to do. They're getting the public used to it, they're getting you to want it. Look, I did actually watch the little promo video, and it's so, a lot of people have said this, but it is so right how, well, I feel it is anyway, it's just my opinion, it just, the way the guy's voice comes across, the way he says it, the way that it's framed to you, it's just like, it's so cool to be recognised, my face is recognised, look, I got a discount on a drink, I'm so cool. It's absolutely pathetic, and yes, it's those kind of stories that make me froth at the mouth. But it's all ammunition for you to put in front of people and hopefully help them with their own awakening process, their own self-realisation. It's more undeniable simply because it's in the mainstream media. They can no longer say to you, oh, you got that from some weird internet site, didn't you? I could say anything, it doesn't make it true. I read it on the internet. Yeah, it is from mainstream media. So you're going to deny that? Are you going to tell me that the mainstream media lies? Oh, do the mainstream media lie? Do they? Do? Oh, so you now agree with me then that the mainstream media lies to you constantly? Ah, little logic error for you there, wasn't there? Oh dear. Did you trip over yourself with that cognitive dissonance? Sorry, I'm taking the mickey now. I shouldn't allow myself to descend into that kind of egotistical mental masturbation. Now that please don't take this the wrong way. That is somewhat something of what I wanted to talk about. Again, another tenuous connection in that manner. This is something I will come back to. I'll take a little break and play some music. Yeah, as I like to do, the music will hopefully through the show, it's sort of all associated somewhat to a theme. Yeah, a lot of the time it's very loose connections. That's just the way my brain works. I'm afraid you have to get used to it. That or just not listen. Just don't tell anybody else you listened. Otherwise they might put you on a list. And they'll be coming round to check you've got your beard. If you haven't got a beard and your tinfoil hat on, they'll be taking you away. They'll send you off to live in a wooden pallet shelter built by Mr. Chunky Mark. Yeah. Yeah, please don't forget, go check out his channel on Vimeo. Channel name is The Artist Taxi Driver. He's sort of bouncing between YouTube and Vimeo at the moment because YouTube are after him, basically. There have been quite a few things going on with YouTube recently, which is just obvious levels of censorship, which they then try to divert responsibility for by claiming that it's because of automated systems and things like that. It's like, oh, we're terribly sorry this happened. It was because of the bots did it and stuff like that. Whereas really, that they're just utilising that as an excuse to allow them to be more overt with their censorship. I've used the word overt a lot, haven't I? Wonder why. Anyway, I will shut up and play some music. A couple of tracks which I think are somewhat appropriate for various reasons. Welcome back, folks. Hopefully you can hear me alright. I'm having to jiggle with volumes on some of my audio tracks because I know they're not balanced to each other, so as not to explode people's speakers. Cool, you can hear me. Okay then, let's carry on. I haven't said tracks I've played so far. The first one, the classic from Edwin Starr, War, What Is It Good For? Oh, absolutely nothing, say again. Yeah, you remember that one. Another classic from Pink Floyd, Money, I think is very appropriate to all the banking stuff going on at the moment. And the other one, the last one, was The Elders of Zion with Masonic Moon. If you haven't checked them out, have a mooch round. You find plenty of stuff online. They've done some interesting little songs. I don't know if they've ever actually released an album or anything, or whether they've just released them onto the internet, as it were, I think. But yeah, I really like the way they use that kind of traditional folky sound. It works very well, I think. Yes, anyway, so that's what I've played so far. So to sort of jump off from what I'd mentioned, talking about I want to go back to talking around that whole concept of the truth movement to a certain degree. I'll venture into other areas as we progress, but it still seems to be a common thread going on at the moment. See various articles now and then, not in any kind of continuous stream sense, but they're certainly popping up on a regular basis. Every few days there's another similar article which sort of talks around the subject. And it's still, maybe it's just me, maybe it's just the way I look at things, or the point I've got to in my current self-realisation. Because please remember, folks, I am just sharing with you the way I look at these things, the things I've seen and looked at and read about. I'm not telling you anything is absolute truth. It's up to you to decide. There may be things that I call truths. I may say to you, I have a truth to share with you, but that's my point of view, that's my perspective, my opinion. There may well be plenty of evidence to back it up, but it's still your choice as to whether you accept it or not. So in that respect, for me, I find it a little bit bemusing how there are still so many people out there in this supposed truth movement that think or are stuck in the mindset of believing there is a truth movement. In my opinion, there is no truth movement per se. There are plenty of groups and movements, groups of activists, whatever you want to call them, that focus around maybe one subject or multiple subjects that they protest against or are active against or whatever. But there isn't anywhere out there that calls itself the truth movement. There is no truth movement HQ. I think the closest you've got to it as a kind of umbrella effect is probably the Occupy movement, with maybe the 9/11 truth movement coming in a close second. Both those groups, certainly the Occupy group, cover many subjects, many sort of targets of interest. 9/11 is a little bit more concentrated to the 9/11 effect, but they take in a lot of other areas, because once you start following that rabbit hole that is 9/11, it leads you to lots of other things. It has to. It just does. It's part and parcel of what 9/11 was all about. And that does link in further as I continue further down this tunnel, down this thread. You may see associations that link into that. Anyway, yes, there is no truth movement, yet people still seem to talk about the truth movement. So really, isn't it more that you're talking about the truth movement within your own head, your own internal movement towards looking for truth or towards truth? So that in a very base way, like I mentioned the other week, it is like a bowel movement, because what are you doing? Pushing shit out or keeping it in? You're trying to discern the diamonds, hello Mr. Bob Diamond, the diamonds from the crap. There's a lot of crap out there. There's a whole lot of disinformation, misinformation, just blatant delusionary beliefs, etc. Yeah, there's a whole lot of crap out there you got to sift through, looking for those diamonds of truth. So you are in effect performing a mental bowel movement. I'll give you a link to an article which JD shared with me the other day. I've read this first one. I haven't read the other ones that this lady has put up yet, which I do need to, because I'm interested, but I have to pursue it further. For those just listening, this is an article on beforeitsnews.com, an article called Part 1, The Truth Movement, Is It Just Another PSYOP to Confuse Us? The lady posted this up, it's on the blogging section. She's got other articles as well. Like I said, I need to read part 2 of this. I did find it very interesting, and I do appreciate that kind of perspective of almost in a way being devil's advocate and pointing at certain things that are, those people who claim to be in the truth movement often fall into the hypocrisy of pointing at the sheeple and saying, look how easily they're deluded by these cult of personality figures and this ridiculous information that's put in front of them, ha ha ha, aren't they stupid sheeple? Yet we ourselves, and I say we because I include myself in that equation, it would be hypocritical of me not to, we often fall to the same problems: confirmation bias, tunnel reality, a desire to believe the truth is out there. Remember Mulder saying that, you have to believe that the truth is out there. You want to believe. So, in that good, in my opinion, good objective fashion, you should often question these things and check into them and research them and cross-reference them to corroborate what you're being told. That is the truth movement. It's not one particular person. It's not one particular face, no matter how red-faced or how many people they claim to be broadcasting to, how many followers they claim to have, how much they charge you for their books, their DVDs, their documents, membership to their private members area where they tell you the truth. All this kind of stuff is all beside the point and is too easily led to the stall of the snake oil salesman, where he will happily sell you his bottle full of liquid bumwee and tell you it's truth serum. All too easily done. And because people desire answers, then it's all too easily exploited. And you need to be aware of and forearmed against that kind of exploitation. The song from Pink Floyd, the Money song, as he says in the lyrics, supposedly money is the root of all evil. It's good old classic cliche which is often brought up and expounded upon, usually by religious people. But the point being, if you sit and digest the idea, in my opinion, the money itself is not the root of the evil. A piece of paper or a coin or whatever it is, whatever it's made out of, is not the root of the evil that it causes, or enables, I should say, rather than causes. It's what we do with it, and it's people's desire for it, and it's people's greed for it. And in the same manner, we have a greed for answers. We want to know the answers. We want to know why. We want justice for things that have been done wrong, or the wrongs have been done against us or our fellows, etc., etc., etc. It's part and parcel of why religion, organised religion, works so well as a tool of control, because people want it. They want you to tell them it's going to be okay. They want you to tell them they will survive death. They want you to tell them God loves them and everything's forgiven and it's all okay. There, never mind. People need that because facing the stark truth is often too scary for them. So they fall into the simple answers. They want simple answers. They want simple reasons so that they can just get on with their lives. And to a degree, but as far as I'm concerned, to a degree that's fair enough, because you're here to experience life. You could argue that. I know a lot of people would argue that you're not put here by somebody else, in that atheistic materialist sense, you just are here, so therefore you should just enjoy life. But either way you look at it, don't get trapped into that losing the enjoyment, the joy of life, because you're too preoccupied with all the negative of life, all the nasty stuff, all the horrible things that are happening, etc., etc. This is something I've talked about it before, and Adonis talks about it a lot. We've talked about it when doing our shows together. Don't miss out on the humour, don't miss out on the joy, don't miss out on the love. It's there. And if we look for those truths as the truth movement should be enabling us to do, then those things become more and more apparent, and you tend, it just seems to be what I've seen, or maybe that's just the way I look at things, like I said, you tend to gravitate towards that side of things. Now, therein comes the possible sidetracking, the corralling, the co-opting, the steering of people's desire for answers, people's desire for reasoning and justice. This is why a few shows ago I think I was asking, what do you consider to be justice, etc. I was trying to plant that seed to get people thinking about it. And in relation to the truth movement, this is something that we've seen before. Please don't allow historical blinkers to make you think that what is happening now today is necessarily totally brand new, never happened before. Again, in a previous show I played that song that it was Chumbawamba recorded it at the time, but it's an old song, the Diggers song about the Diggers. And in this particular reference, because I think there were certain mentions along this line in that article and others that we were looking at, there are those figures within the modern day, the contemporary truth movement, that are being utilised in one way or another as cult figures, as icons of a cult of personality. And therein is the big danger of people being drawn in simply by their desire for answers, their desire for truth. They want to find out. So along come the little snake oil salesman to lure them off to their own little cul-de-sac where they can feed them a tunnel reality, a totally biased, altered version that they wish to utilise to entrap these people. This is not something that is brand new. The reason I mention this is I've talked about this before in other shows. A lot of what we see going on at the moment could easily be pointed at as a resurgence of the counterculture that we experienced in the 60s. And again, it wasn't just confined to the 60s. You find that, I found, again, maybe my opinion, that counterculture seemed to spring off from the counterculture that emerged somewhat at the beginning of the 19th century, that led into the arts and crafts movement and Art Deco and things like that. A lot of similarities. And there is a deeper thread to that, which I will come back to later on. But that 60s counterculture, that, as people are saying in the chat room, the flower power, the good old hippie movement, you dirty old hippie, all that kind of good stuff. It didn't necessarily just suddenly emerge in the 60s. It was enabled and then co-opted. And if you don't think it was co-opted, please look into things like the Iran-Contra affair and some of the various other nefarious little schemes, Machiavellian schemes that certainly for one Nixon had his dirty little hands in, etc., etc. They were trying quite avidly to divert the growing power of the civil movements of the time. They'd seen the effect that Martin Luther King had to galvanise people into a true power of peaceful non-compliance that was actually achieving things in a social sense. They were achieving goals that they set out for. They didn't get all the way, arguably they didn't get all the way, but they certainly achieved a lot, and they certainly achieved a lot in the sense of codifying a way of moving people in that sense and making social changes. And the government at the time wanted, quite desperately to divert that as quickly as they could, and lo and behold, out sprang the 60s counterculture hippie movement with figures like Timothy Leary, etc. Now, therein is a subject which I myself have ventured into to some degree. I've talked about the use of drugs, the use of psychotropics. You could say I have propagated the utility of such things in respect of seeking truths, utilizing them to seek truths within yourself. The use of psychotropics, other substances and other methods such as meditation, etc., to seek for truths. And I say truths because I don't claim any right to or true knowledge of any singular truth. I might talk about that, I might lean towards that kind of perspective, but for reasons of trying not to be too much of a hypocrite, I won't claim that I have any knowledge of any kind of ultimate truth. Anyway, diverting myself with my usual caveats. I've got an extended caveat for later on, never mind. Yes, but for me, looking into that, and as I still do, I still utilise substances that according to all the social norms I shouldn't do. But I have found through my own investigation and my own point of view and perspective, and I feel acquired and experientially acquired knowledge of balancing the use of such things. They are tools. They are tools for us to use. They are stepping stones for us to use. For quoting religious scripture deliberately here, just simply to make a point about various correlations, I have given you all the seed-bearing plants and herbs to use. What is it? Genesis 12, I think, something like that. I can't remember exactly. I'm not that avid of a biblical scholar, I'm afraid, but it's there. Look it up for yourself. These tools are here for us to use. But that is the point I'm trying to make. They are tools. They are not the answer. And therein is a good indication, I feel, of part of why and how the counterculture allowed itself to be co-opted and diverted and corralled, and a similar thing is still going on today, arguably, with a lot of the attitudes towards such things, where even if it is not directly stated, it is implied that the only way you will find the truth is through the use of these things. So that, in a subliminal way, implies that these things themselves are the truth. I find that to be, in and of itself, a warning that you should think about. They are not the truth. They are merely a stepping stone, a tool, something to help you along your way. They will not necessarily, I should say that, they're not necessarily give you the truth or a truth or whatever. I had to say not necessarily, just simply because, for myself, there is a lot of things I've learned while in altered states that have been exceedingly helpful to me. So there's no way I would say that they absolutely don't. No, not at all. I will not be a hypocrite. I'm not a flip-flopper. I still believe that the use of these subjects, and yes, I believe the use of these substances help. And of course, that, as I've said many times before, that's something for you to look into for yourself, research for yourself about what you're thinking of imbibing, etc., and make an educated choice. Don't just go into it willy-nilly, let's party, stuff it all down my neck and see what happens. Your body is your physical spacesuit in this experience, and your mind is the interface. Your mind and spirit is the interface between your true self and that physical experience. So if you mess with it too much, you might break something. Let's put it that way. Be careful not to break your internal parts. Yes, anyway. So still sort of relating around that truth movement and relations to the 60s counterculture. And as I say, as it lists in that article, there are various figures, and it does seem to be worse whenever it is an individual. I think if you talk about in a metaphysical sense, almost spiritual sense, by it being centralized to a singular entity, a person, or even an object in some cases, that acts as more of a black hole effect to fixate and create a tunnel reality around itself. That's why, a big reason why, part and parcel of why I prefer to work with groups of people and working in a group environment, because you get a bit more checks and balances then, you get a bit more objectivity, you get various points of view. People don't necessarily all agree, and that to me is a good thing, because if we all agreed, we wouldn't, wouldn't be making any progress. Progress rises out of the disagreements. Because disagreements allow us to then work on solutions. Solutions move us forward. So, should I play some more music? I think I should. I've somewhat rambled around the truth movement. My point for yet again going back to this subject, because I have been with these particular shows doing at the moment, trying to point out things I feel are fundamentals, because in this crazy psychotic world, or society I should say, the world itself isn't psychotic. I don't think Mama Patcher is psychotic, not at all. No, she's probably the only sane one amongst us. But in the way our society is being twisted, the society itself is becoming psychotic, as has been argued by many sociologists over recent years, etc., and psychologists and whatever, the experts coming out of the woodwork. That in a life raft, in a hurricane fashion, makes the most obvious fundamentals stand out. They are the life rafts that we should gravitate towards, the fundamentals of what we are as human beings and what makes the society we live in and what we think, because we're the ones creating this society. What we think makes a good society, so therefore what we should be working towards. If you don't like the way society is, get involved in making it the way you would prefer to see it. The classic Plato quote, if I can remember it properly, is just because you don't take an interest in politics does not mean politics will not take an interest in you. In other words, another one I think, which was from either him or Aristotle, if you don't get involved in politics, you will be ruled by your inferiors. And I'm not necessarily trying to get you involved in politics in a contemporary sense, because I do think our current political politics are just a puppet show. But as they were referencing it, politics didn't just mean the Senate or the government or whatever. They were talking about the politics of your social environment that you live within. What makes your society, what makes it function, what's enabling it, and what makes it a good society to live in that's beneficial to hopefully everyone that lives within it, etc., etc. Yeah, I'm caveating myself again, sorry. But in that respect, this is why I try to lean towards talking about or around fundamentals, or what I feel are fundamentals, to hopefully get people moving forward, not just stagnating, because that's a lot of what the New Age movement and the co-opting of the New Age movement has been all about, stagnating people. And that's something else, as well as a little side note. Talking about the definition of the truth movement, it's not really a movement per se. In the same manner, the New Age movement wasn't really a movement per se. There is no, singular headquarters of the New Age movement, etc. But that's something I'll come back to. Yes, I'll play some more music. And after this, I will probably get, like I said, I'll get a bit more esoteric on your ass. Simply because there has been certain things that have piqued my interest over recent days, which, yes, anyway, shut up and play music, you old fool. A couple of old tracks which are classic, I think, and appropriate, and one a bit more contemporary, re-envisioning of a classic, I think. Anyway, yes, play some music. Back in about, maybe 10 minutes or so.
We are flipping the pyramid. Flipping the pyramid.
I clicked the button quick. Hopefully I stopped it in time. Welcome back, folks. Yes, that was Jimi Hendrix first with All Along the Watchtower, and Matthew Southern Comfort, Woodstock, and Jimmy Cash doing his version of Personal Jesus. All good classic stuff, I think. Yes, anyway. Before I go any further, I want to say sort of like an extended version of my usual caveat that I often repeat. I'm not a journalist, I'm not an expert on anything, I'm not trying to sell you anything, and I will also add to that, I'm not a Mason, I am not a Freemason, I'm not a Rosicrucian, I'm not a Luciferian, I don't believe in the Blavatsky theosophical Luciferian point of view, etc., etc. I'm not a guru, I'm not a shaman, I'm not a new ager. How many other different labels and boxes I could say and add to that. It just seems very appropriate at the moment, and certainly relates to some of the stuff I want to talk about. But the Freemasonry thing and the Rosicrucian stuff, it just seemed recently I've had some visitors, some people posting comments on my YouTube channel, which seemed to try and push me into that box, or that at least seemed to be what they were trying to do. Even though, yes, a lot of the subjects and a lot of the perspectives I talk from or about, if you look into these subjects, they are part and parcel of, or stem from, or through, however you want to look at it and what it is, Freemasonry, the New Age movement, Theosophy, etc., etc. Loads of different connections, because, as I've often said and talked about, I don't follow any one religion, I don't follow any one perspective except my own. It's why I often lean towards, or more towards, things like Buddhism and Sufism, because I personally find them much more helpful than the dogmatic repetition of something that was handed to me by somebody else. There is a famous quote from Rumi, out beyond the ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there is a field, I will meet you there. Yes, I often talk about what is right, what is wrong, what is good, what is bad, but I've also often talked about the polarities, the dancing duality that is the physical existence we live within. And once you start to see that, you can then start to see maybe a little above it, beyond it, behind it, however you want to think of it, because that's when thought starts to divest itself of its imposed structure, and you start to approach that clear, focused singularity. And unfortunately, that's the only words I can think to describe it, because when you start looking towards that kind of stuff, words fail description. So yes, anyway, I'm not a Freemason, I'm not a Rosicrucian, I'm not a Theosophist, I'm not a Luciferian, blah 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 blah. And I'm also not a Christian, not a Muslim, not a Buddhist, whatever. Away with your labels and boxes. So, with that incantation aside, I wanted to, I think I might mention this to a few other people as we're chatting. I'll put a link to it in the chat room if people haven't seen it. This is a video that's linked up on the FlippingThePyramid.co website, .co.uk, sorry. The video section, it's right back in the back. It was one of the first videos that somebody linked into there. It's hosted off YouTube, so you can always find it on YouTube if you want to go and look for it. This is a series of documentaries that there is quite a bit to watch if you get into it. Attention span forewarning, folks. Each one of these is a good 3 hours long, and there's 3 of them so far. I think the film company is planning to do a 4th one. I think they are basically just going to keep it going as a series, which I think is great. There's lots of good stuff in there, and that's why I mentioned it, giving people the link, etc. It's called the New Atlantis: Secret Mysteries of America's Beginnings. That's the title of part 1, which is linked, as I say, in the video section on the website. It's a very interesting series if you want to get into the topics and subject matter. Please don't be put off by the title of the documentary, the video itself. It talks a lot about Freemasonry, occultism. Yes, it's a lot of history. There is a massive info dump in each episode that, like I said, concentration span warning. It's the kind of thing that you need to sit down and pay attention to for 3 hours a session if you're interested. Now, the reason I ended up looking at it was because of said comments on my channel. I thought, well, it's been many years since I was looking at that kind of stuff. I'll do sort of a little refresher. I hadn't actually watched that documentary series yet. I'd had them sort of on the back burner because they are quite long. I thought I'll get round to watching them at some point. I'd bother to spend the time to sit and watch them. There's a lot in there that I'd looked at before in terms of subject matters, etc., but there's also quite a lot of good stuff in there I hadn't seen or heard of before. And it was in that kind of way when you haven't looked at something for so long that when you come back to look at it again, it's almost like, it's fresh, it's refreshing to look at again. It's like watching a favourite film again after you haven't seen it for so many years or something like that. But this, as I say, I was doing it as a refresher course for myself, really, more than anything. But it did even more so make me feel that I have to point out to people I am not a Freemason, etc., 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 as I've said. Although, yes, I will talk about certain subjects that are part and parcel of that kind of thing. Does not mean I believe everything they talk about or present or that kind of perspective. I'm not a follower of that kind of stuff. I am not a member of any secret society, and I don't wish to be. This is something that these people seem to not be able to get their head around, which I think is part of the problem. If you watch those documentaries, as the title implies, they talk about various esoteric and occult connections to the founding of and the beginning of the United States of America, and the possibility that it was pre-planned as the new Atlantis. I was going to say as the experiment of the new Atlantis. It's not so much an experiment, it's more an enacting of that dream goal. If you know about these kind of subjects, all this kind of stuff, eventually, as you trace it back, like I said lots before, if you're ignorant of history, you're doomed to repeat it. You have to look back at history and trace things back as far as you can. This kind of stuff leads right back to really the beginnings of Western civilization. The great empires that have accepted academic history, and back to figures like Aristotle and Pythagoras and Plato and Socrates. As I've said many times before, I'm not sure if I have on this show, but I know I have on many other places, a lot of what is occurring in the grand schema of things that seems to be going on across the planet is an attempt to reach a version of Plato's Republic, a technocratic version of Plato's Republic, where the uber elite, as they like to think of themselves, sit like the pharaonic god-king philosophers on top of the pyramid, while the mass herd of dumbed-down, chemically neutered population shuffle around performing all the menial tasks required by said elites. And in between the elite and the mass classes are the subservient enforcers, a mixture of soldiers come police come priests. They're the ones that interpret the wishes of the elite and control and keep down any insurrections, etc. Obviously, if you can ever be bothered to read Plato's Republic, it's a horrible book to read, I forewarn you of that. It's exceedingly dry, just boring text to read. Even if the subject matter does interest you, it's just it's not an easy read. It's not an easy thing to read. But if ever you can be bothered, it's one of those books that is or should be on your reading list. But the way that's presented as an ideal, a utopian ideal of society, I find there's a lot of open area to interpret or misinterpret what Plato may have intended with his whole story about the Republic, because it is presented almost as like a story. And also his accounts of the legend of Atlantis and how that links into so many other things. Yes, do bear with me on this, because as I said, it will be a little bit esoteric. It verges off into lots of directions and includes things like, as you follow the tree of this thing down and down and down, you find connections all over the place to religious sects, occultism, foundings of religions, things like the Knights Templar, the Rosicrucians, the Jesuit order, the Knights of Malta, all this kind of good, juicy, secret society stuff. And they all flow along a similar thread and from a similar root, beginnings back in that pharaonic age where they did supposedly still have a form of magic which they then implied to other cultures as their own society was falling down and taken down. That secret esoteric knowledge was surreptitiously spirited away in the same kind of fashion as things like supposedly the Ark of the Covenant disappearing into the mists, etc. Now, in a very odd jump, but to me seemingly this is why I wanted to bring it up, a highly interesting Synchronicity, yes, I use that great word. Put your tinfoil hats on, folks. This is where it will get a bit strange. And this is really part of the reason why I wanted to mention it and talk about this subject. It wasn't so much because of just the comments on my channel. It made me think that, yeah, I do need to state about this stuff so that people don't think I'm a Freemason or whatever. Or at least, you know, I can say that to people and they can think whatever they like. But this is a little news story that you might very well have missed. It seemed to skim through the news articles quite quickly. I didn't see it exactly propagate much, which in a way is sometimes a little note of warning, because often these kind of little stories carry signals to different groups or people, now deliberately put out in the mainstream media. They're like hidden messages, basically. It's like using the mainstream media to carry a cipher, a symbolic cipher or worded cipher that is meant to be viewed by certain groups and people to cause certain things to happen, even to the extent of mind control agendas. You know, talk about people with talking about the situation with the various mass shootings and the potentialities of connections to mind control agendas, etc. You know, the mainstream media can also be used to put out those kind of indications to people. But anyway, this was a little clip that I picked up from Mox News. Thank you to Mox News. As I've said before, go and check him out on YouTube if you haven't already. He does a great job of re-uploading various snippets from the mainstream media. Anyway, this was a little news release from NASA about new images they have of a cluster of galaxies. Now, I went to, hang on, let me multitask opening up links, give you the actual link to the NASA story in one sec, folks. Multitasking is not my greatest talent. It's from the Chandra Observatory, I believe, on the NASA website. It's under nasa.gov/mission pages /Chandra /multimedia /Phoenix constellation, I believe. Give the link to the people in the chat room. Yeah. Anyway, they had good old Kaku sticking his face on the mainstream media. I think they like Kaku as a spokesman because he looks a little bit like Einstein, and you know, he's got that friendly demeanour, which means the public feel connected to him in an emotive fashion. So he's more believable, he's more acceptable, etc., etc. And I do find a lot of the subjects he talks about very interesting. I've looked at a lot of the stuff he's talked about, you know, but yes, anyway, he himself is not important. Like I said, beware the cult of personality. But it's more the subject he's talking about. NASA releasing information about this new cluster, this supermassive cluster. According to them, it's the biggest thing they've ever seen. Super massive, makes our galaxy seem minuscule, like the size of a pinhead compared to it, etc., etc. Yeah, you're talking about out there in the big, wide, vast expanses of space. So things can get really big, and this supposedly is really, really, really big. Now, anyway, all that sort of thing aside, you know, as I say, it caught my interest because I watch things like the science news, etc. And yes, of course, usual kind of caveat in the sense of NASA. I know, as Adonis likes to say, never a straight answer, partly why I played the Masonic Moon track, etc., etc. Yeah, NASA filters the information, of course they do. And as I said, interesting note that this sort of slipped in and through the mainstream media and off again before it had even been noticed. They used Kaku to present it, etc., etc. Now, the reason I bring this up, and the reason it caught my attention primarily, was because it's this constellation this cluster is in the Phoenix constellation, so they've called the cluster the Phoenix cluster. Now that caught my attention because, and I know I was chatting about this with other folks recently, again why I reference you to that particular series of documentaries is because they talk about the Phoenix, its potential occultic and esoteric connections. It's a very, very old symbol, and mythological, or part of our ancient mythology, etc., etc., and how it in respects of those particular documentaries, how it is surreptitiously and subtly included in a lot of stuff to do with the founding of America. The majority of the eagles you see in the symbology used on things, American seal of office and stuff like that, isn't really an eagle, it's a phoenix. In certain places you can find older versions where it's a bit more apparent that it's a phoenix. And as the system, and I say the system deliberate, as the system likes to do and has done in many different ways, again and again and again throughout the past, when they take over an area or a culture or a society, they merge their true beliefs into the localized beliefs. So Herne the Hunter becomes the devil, the horned devil for the general population of northwestern Europe in our older cultures as we were Christianized, etc., etc. There's lots and lots of examples of that, and it goes to the nth degree. And of course this can lead you off into the subject of astrotheology and all its various and many connections to a lot of what's seemingly going on in terms of an agenda across the planet. Now, still, I need to rush a little bit because I'm running out of time. I know I'd left it too late. But this caught my attention because this news item come out the day after I'd been watching the last of those documentaries where, as I say, they mention the Phoenix and its potential connections to other older stuff. And then this news story comes out, Phoenix cluster, that's interesting. What's that all about? So I had a bit of a mooch. I went and checked our favourite site, the Wikipedia. Looked up the constellation on the Wikipedia. If people want to have a look, there's the link. I know it's easy enough to find anyway, but whatever. Now, one of the things that then even more so caught my attention in an oddly synchronistic fashion, the main star that makes up the Phoenix constellation, waiting for page load, is commonly known as Alpha Phonesis, also named Anka, which is an Arabic word meaning the phoenix. That made me think, well, that's probably why it's called the Phoenix constellation then, isn't it? But I followed that tunnel a little bit further. Where's that word coming from? Where's that name coming from? How old is the knowledge of this star? If it's named in Arabic, it's the knowledge of this particular star is probably quite old. The Arab history is a very good history in terms of astronomy, etc. I think back before the Great Crusades and all. Again, you see how all these things so intertwined, so complexly intertwined. Back before the Great Crusades, the Arab world were probably the leading culture in terms of astronomy and mathematics. So that interested me. I pursued that, and turned out the name of the star in Latin is, if I pronounce it correctly, Lucida Cumbae, or Cumbae. Like I said, I'm not great on the pronunciation. Sorry if there's any Latin speakers out there if I butchered that. Lucida basically means luminous, or the light of, or the illumined, the illuminating. Again, see a connection. And Cumbae was that was one of the things that really made me stop and consider. Cumbae is basically a skiff, which is a type of small boat. But in the little notes next to it, in the brackets next to the, when I was looking up the meaning of the word, it said primarily meaning the boat of Charon, the entity that ferried souls across the Hades, into Hades. Sorry. That really made me stop and think, oh, hang on a minute here, I've got this jump that leads me from a connection of the founding of America through the Phoenix, then this mainstream media news article put in front of everybody to go, we found this enormous cluster, this Phoenix cluster is growing, and one of the things they talk about is how in the middle of this cluster, it has, as a lot of clusters and our own galaxy does, there is a centre that is basically a star factory, big nebulous clouds that produce stars, and this thing is producing stars at such a rate that they've never seen before. It's astounding, according to all these NASA scientists, etc., etc. So what is it they're saying to me? The Phoenix is coming, and the Phoenix is actually the Charon, the boat keeper. Excuse me. Also Lucida, the illumined boat keeper. Yes. Curiouser and curious, said Alice. And like I said, I am not a Freemason. I don't believe in their tenets. I think the idea of such a secret society, Gnostic hierarchy, defeats itself. It automatically creates that pyramid, and that's a major part of the problem. I'm not a Freemason. But I found it quite curious, this synchronicity, so I felt I must share it. Therefore, if nothing comes of it, if the checks and balances of sharing it with others makes me see fault with it, see ridiculousness with it, whatever, that's great. That helps sort the shit from the diamonds. But at the same time, I took note of it, took interest in it, so I thought I'd put it out there so that way, after the fact, if anything does come of it, I can't then go, oh, I thought of that, and nobody will believe me because it's too late now. Not that I claim any ability to be prophetic. Like I said lots before, I'm just looking at this stuff the same as everybody else, well, maybe not quite the same as everybody else, but you know what I mean. Attempting to interpret it, attempting to find the valuable within all the crap that's out there, trying to discern stuff both from an objective and subjective point of view, using reason and intuition. I love that quote from Sadhguru Buddha. Don't believe anything, no matter where you read it, no matter who said it, not even if I said it, unless it correlates with your own reasoning, etc. Sorry, I'm paraphrasing terribly because I can't remember it properly. Don't take it as spoon-fed. Just because I've seen certain things this way, just because I can create, as I often say, tenuous connections, doesn't necessarily mean there's actually anything there. But yes, interesting nonetheless. Like I said, a little bit esoteric when you start to think about all these various potential connections. There's a lot of variables going on in this when you link it into that kind of ancient knowledge, hidden secret knowledge that may have been encircled by these secret society groups over the ages, attempting to keep it to themselves and utilise it to empower themselves. And lo and behold, what have we got at the moment, folks? A whole bunch of psychopathic people in power who are forcing us further and further into a concentration camp, basically. That black hole effect, as I mentioned earlier, to me seems pretty much inevitable if they are allowed to continue with it. Yes, as Ian has said in the chat room, I think, therefore I may possibly be. Be careful not to fall into that existential trap. You do exist. If you didn't, you wouldn't be here thinking now. and as I like to keep trying nudging to remind people, you cannot just sit on your ass and think nice thoughts and hope that this will all go away, because if you do, the psychopaths who are sat on those steamroller machines will just quite happily roll over you, throw a few flowers at you and go, there you go, you silly hippie, ha ha ha, as they roll over you and crush you and move on to the next. So you cannot just sit on your ass and do nothing. You cannot just be a human being. You have to also be a human doing. Do. It is trying to revolve around that balance that hopefully will help us move forward to something better. Yes, I think that's enough rambling from me. I'm going to play a couple of tunes. Which one shall I play? Something a little bit uplifting, something a little bit comical as well. Just because I will often refer to quotes such as like Plato, Aristotle, whatever. I'll often refer to quotes from philosophical figures simply because I've studied philosophy, so I've ended up having to read writings of all these bloody people. So I've sort of seen a lot of that stuff, so therefore I can sort of reference it a bit more readily. But that doesn't necessarily mean I always agree with them. It doesn't necessarily mean I agree with everything they're about. Don't fall for that classic fallacy of guilt by association, or automatically 100% it means you believe everything they've ever said. Whoa! Too often people like to trip you over with that kind of crap. But in a sort of comedic nod to all that good stuff, I'll play that. Take care, folks. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here in the chat room. If you've been here, great to see you. Keep looking, keep thinking, keep debating, keep doing as well. Don't forget intent and action. That duality dances round and round, and on we move, evolving, hopefully. Take care, folks. I will chat at you again next week.